Hi there, I'm Angie O'Gorman from Dover STLS and I'm the Specialist Teacher for Communication and Interaction, and today I'd like to talk to you about social perspective taking. I'm just about to share my screen with you. Okay, so hopefully you can see that. So as I said, I'm going to talk to you about social perspective taking. Just from this first slide, very easy to understand what I mean by social perspective taking. We've got a number on the floor there. Got one guy seeing that number as a 6, another guy seeing that number as a 9, and both are right, depending on from the perspective they're coming from. So that's just a social perspective in a very simplistic term. And the reason I'm talking about this today is that a lot of children with autism and social communication difficulties struggle in this area. So we're going to have a look at why that is and some strategies to help them. Okay, so aims of today's training. To understand what social perspective taking is and the cognitive processes involved. To learn some strategies to support children who have difficulties in this area. And I've put a third one in here that I really feel is quite important because we talk about social perspective taking and we always talk about it like it's a deficit in children with autism, but in actual fact, us neurotypicals have a deficit in this area as well, because sometimes we struggle to understand the perspective of the autistic individual. So it's important that we put on what Luke Bearden refers to as the autism lens, and we try and understand the perspective of the child, because if we can do this, then we can support the child to also understand other perspectives, and we can keep the child's self-esteem intact, because their understanding isn't necessarily the same as ours, and it's not their fault. So we just need to teach them in a positive way about other people's social perspective. So just on that autism lens there, we've got a little boy and he says, try to be positive and see the world from my perspective. Understand, I may make mistakes because I don't see the world the way you do. Okay, so sometimes we might need to explain some of the things in the world in order for autistic children to understand our points of view, just like we need to understand theirs. So what is social perspective taking? Social perspective taking occurs anytime you share space with others in the absence of active social interactions. So you don't need to be talking to someone. It's basically whenever someone else is around, and in other circumstances where we'll see two in a minute, we're getting an understanding of what's going on, other people's perspective. We use social perspective taking before, during and after a social encounter, helping us figure out our social responses based on our own and others' social goals in a situation. Okay, so we're constantly trying to understand other people's motives and present ourselves in a particular way. So the reason I said you don't have to have other people around is, in reality, social perspective taking is active anytime anyone is thinking about others, even when these people are not physically present. For instance, we consider the actions, reactions, motives and intentions of people in context within the books we read, within the news stories we read, and any time we watch people on our screens or listen to them on the radio or listen to them in a podcast. Okay, so we're constantly using the skill of social perspective taking. And because we use social perspective taking when we're watching screens and when we're listening to the radio, etc., we can use these things to help children with autism to develop their social perspective taking skills. And we'll see that a little bit later on. Okay, so for those of you that don't know, metacognition is thinking about thinking, it's those skills we use to do that. Social perspective taking involves metacognition because all participants or observers of a social situation are expected to think about what other people are thinking and feeling about each other, included in their motives and intentions. We then use this thinking to interpret the situation and problem solve how to socially respond. So we're using these skills to work out how we're going to respond in social situations. Okay, developing social perspective taking. Social perspective taking is a complicated process that for the neurotypical social learner develops intuitively over time. So although it involves quite complicated cognitive processes, generally us neurotypical people develop those skills and don't really think about it when we're doing it. For children with autism though, and social communication difficulties, this does not always happen. So we need to provide opportunities to develop and teach social perspective taking. Michelle Garcia-Winner is a big name in the area of social thinking, and she identifies 5 steps involved in social perspective taking. It will just kind of show you how complex those cognitive processes are. However, for the purpose of my presentation, I've simplified those 5 steps. So she gives a very lengthy description of hers, but I've just broken it right down for you. So step 1 is just when you notice that you're in a social situation and the people in it. So it may be that you've gone into the supermarket, for example, notice there's people around you. Step 2, awareness. So you become aware of where you are and who's with you more, and you're aware that I'm thinking about you and that you're thinking about me. So others may be thinking about you also. Step 3, you start to make sense of the situation. You're trying to figure out the motives and intentions of and plans of others. So it may be that you're in a supermarket, at that customer service desk, there's someone else in front of you. What are they doing? What's their intention for being there? And then step 5, you become aware that they're making sense of you also. Okay, so it may be that you're in that customer service queue, they're in front of you, you've worked out that their intention is to take something back to the shop and get a refund. They've worked out that you're in the queue doing that also, but you're going to have to wait your turn because you're after them. So you've both kind of worked out each other's intentions and plans. Step 5 is monitoring and adjusting behaviour. Now, I might be standing behind someone who's getting something exchanged and they're debating with the shop assistant whether they want a cash refund or a refund back on their card, or they want to go and have an exchange. And I might be thinking, oh, I'm in a rush, I really need to get this done quickly. But I'm going to monitor and adjust my behaviour. I know it's not very socially nice for me to push in or sort of start saying things from behind. So I might just act very calm and patient, even though inside maybe I might be feeling a bit stressed. And the person in front of me might be aware of the fact that, oh, there's someone behind me, so I better hurry up. So they're constantly adjusting their behaviour as well. So that's the stages broken right down. But in reality, those stages happen within milliseconds. And like I said, it's generally very intuitive. And we don't even think about it. The first 4 steps involve that social thought, metacognition that I spoke about. The last step involves us adapting our behaviour, doing the right thing for not just us, but also for the people around us. Like I say, I'm at the customer service desk, but I know it's not right for me to push in and go to the front of the queue. I've got to wait my turn. So it's important to recognise that trying to support children who struggle with social perspective is quite challenging because they are quite complex stages and we do them intuitively. And sometimes children with autism don't do that. So we need to teach them to develop those strategies in a positive way. And again, that brings us back to the autism lens. We have to be aware that they see things differently. And the challenge it is for us to see things from their point of view as well. This is an example from class that really shows you the difference between autistic children and a more socially aware neurotypical child. So basically in class, Chris, he's got a diagnosis of autism. He needs help with his work, so he shouts out, "I need help." He then doesn't understand why the teacher responds with, "Don't call out." However, if we use the autism lens in this case, we know that Chris has got a personal goal to get help from his teacher because he's struggling with his work. So he asks for help. He shouts it maybe because he's at the back of the class, he's worried the teacher won't hear him. However, if we look at it more from a neurotypical point of view, we know the other students in the class have got a greater understanding of social perspective taking. So they recognise that as well as a personal goal that they might need some help, there's also a collective goal here. And the collective goal is that the class need to complete their work and mustn't be disturbed. Therefore, rather than shout out, they might choose to raise their hand to get the teacher's attention, or they may personally go up to the teacher's desk and ask a question quietly. So that they would do things differently. Okay, so that's a very basic example. And in that circumstance, I feel it's not fair to punish that autistic child. They're calling out for help because they want help. So respond to them, give them that help, and then later on maybe, or maybe take them aside in the lesson and say to them what would be an appropriate way of getting attention. Okay, so there's a variety of strategies we can use to support the development of social perspective taking. There's a list of them here, and I'm going to go through them each individually. So something called SODA, social stories, social scenario cards, video clips and role play, fiction stories, teaching through personal memories, comment strip conversations, and something called SOCS, which I'm going to come on to as well. Now, these aren't the only ways. These are just things that I've used a lot, which I find quite useful. But it's important to remember that every child is an individual. And as a teacher, there's those moments that you can use as teaching opportunities. So when a child with autism perhaps does something in the room that doesn't account for someone else's perspective, maybe take them aside and show them a more appropriate way of gaining that attention or doing that thing in a positive way. So they're learning along the way. So I'm going to start with SODA. Now, SODA stands for stop, observe, deliberate, and act. Now, this is basically a way of just encouraging the autistic child to take time to process the situation and not jump in. This could be used with ADHD children as well, because quite often ADHD children will jump in and make errors because they haven't fully processed the situation. So stop, observe, deliberate, then act. Okay, so by start to self-question, figure out what's going on in this situation. Observe. What social cues can you see that can help you? Deliberate. Figure out how you're going to be successful in this situation. Act. Follow through your plans that you've developed in that deliberation stage. I'm going to show you an example of this now so it becomes clearer. So an example of SODA, maybe that a child has gone round to a friend's house. So stop. So the child stopped at the room, the family room of the house. They've been invited round to watch a movie. So they've stopped at the door. They're having a look round. They're observing. They can see that people are sitting. They can see that people are talking. and they can see how they're acting. Deliberate. It's time for the child to think now, oh, where should I sit? Who should I be near? What should I talk about with them? Should I eat a snack? Act. The child chooses to sit near Jacob because he's calm. He knows that they both like science fiction. Everyone is eating popcorn, so the autistic child decides to eat popcorn too. Okay, that's just a very basic example, but I think that the key thing about SODA is that you're teaching the child to just stop for a minute, process the situation, and see if there's anything in the environment that can help you to show how to socially respond in that situation. Social stories, these are used frequently in our schools. They can be used for a number of different things, but they're really good to develop social perspective and just to explain someone else's point of view in a situation. Social scenario cards. There's a variety of these on the market. These ones are just twinkle ones, but I chose to show these ones today. I don't know how well you can see them, but what I liked about them is it breaks down into what's socially acceptable to say and what you should just think. And there's an example there where Granny comes in and gives a teenage boy a big kiss in front of his friends. And perhaps appropriate is to say, oh, thanks, Granny, and then maybe talk to her later and say, please don't do that in front of my friends later. But inside, it might be okay to think, oh, yuck, I really wish she hadn't have done that. So it's teaching the child that some things it's best to hold inside and not say out loud and offend people. So that's just a nice little one there. Video clips and role play. We've got access these days to so many clips on YouTube. These are just some that are on empathy, and empathy links very well with social perspective taking, understanding someone else's point of view. So clips that you can show and talk about and share ideas about with autistic children, and also maybe role play some of those scenarios, but also everyday programs like soap operas, various children's television programs. You can sit and watch clips, talk about the social scenarios, act them out, and work out what's best to do in different social situations. And children as well love filming themselves and making little videos and showing how to solve situations. Linked to videos is fiction stories as well, similar idea. You can read through the story and you can talk about how the different characters are feeling. Michelle Garcia Winner uses the example of Red Riding Hood, and in particular all the fairy tales, because it's very clear in fairy tales that how characters are feeling and their behaviours. It's a very evil and good divide. So what you can do is look at the story with the child and model how to form opinions. So, and you can model that by basically showing how you've got your evidence. So, oh, it seems like Red Riding Hood is, oh, she's scared. And I know this because the wolf is chasing her. Okay, so you're giving clear evidence to build up that social perspective taking. And then you can ask the child, oh, how do you think the wolf might be feeling? Oh, and how do you know that from the story? Teaching using personal memories is also a really good one, because these are things that the child already has access to. It may be that the child has had some experiences with other children in the room and knows a bit about them, and therefore is able to adjust their behaviour to support their social perspective taking. So it says, teach how to use personal memories about others to make educated guesses about them. Teach throughout the day, and as teachers you can teach these sort of things throughout the day. Okay, for example, if you've got a child in your room that constantly talks about cars, it may work something like this. So you might say to them, oh, you like cars, so you like to talk about them. What does Tim like? Oh, he likes dogs. How can we make Tim happy? Oh, let's talk about dogs for a while. Just so you're getting that turn taking and understanding and sharing there going. Another example is there, what can you remember about the last time you cuddled Jane? Oh, she didn't like it, did she? Oh, what can we do? Oh, let's maybe do a high five. Okay, and that's particularly good for those children who constantly cuddle other people and make other people feel uncomfortable. So it's just a few ideas there, but use the knowledge that the child already has and build on it. That's a fantastic way to learn. Comic strip conversations. These are really good as well, and illustrate social perspective in a very visual way. So it's a simple drawing between 2 or more people. You illustrate a situation that has occurred or one that perhaps you think might occur in the future and you want to prepare the child for it. Use speech bubbles and thought bubbles, and you can use colours on there as well to represent emotions. There's the book there of Comic Strip Conversations. It's just an example here. So this boy here, all on his own, he wants to go and join these children who are all chatting together. He's saying, all the kids are talking together, I want to talk with them. So then he's decided he's going over and he's going to say, oh, I'm wearing Star Wars underpants. And then the thought bubbles of the children over here, you can see, oh, I don't like it when he interrupts. Oh, I wish he wouldn't talk about underpants. They're not really interested in that. So that's just a way of illustrating other people's perspective. And then you can say to the child, oh, how else could you have done that? Could you have said, excuse me? Could you have gone over and waited until it was appropriate to join in? What else could you have talked about? Okay, so comic strip conversations are really good at opening that dialogue and getting ideas going. This is SOCS. Now, SOCS seems quite a complicated process, but once you get to grips with it, it gets a bit easier. And it's really good, in particular, if a situation has happened and there's been arguments and you want to break it down. How could we have dealt with this better? Let's look at everyone's perspective in the situation. So SOCS stands for situation, options, consequences, choices, strategies, and simulation. Okay, and I'll go through it on this slide, but it will become clearer when I show you an example of it. So situation, who, what, when, where did it happen, what's gone on? Options, at this point you brainstorm the possible options for the situation or possible options you could have taken in that situation if whatever has already happened. Consequences, list the consequences that have already happened or the consequences that might happen should you go and do these things. Choices, what's the best option? Have a look at the options and the consequences and decide what is the best option to do. Strategies, how are you going to go about carrying this out? How are you going to sort this out if the situation occurs again? And simulation, let's practice, let's have a role play. Let's practice this social situation so it's easier for you next time. Right, the example should make it a little bit clearer now. So we've got a situation now of Tom's gone round to someone's house for an hour. That person wanted him to play the computer game, but Tom wants to ride a bike. So the little boy gets mad. He says, it's my house. I should do what I want to do. Okay, so we'll look at the options. So we could make Tom play the computer game with the child. The child could go and ride the bike with Tom. The children could do 2 different things. So Tom could go and ride his bike. The child could basically just play the computer game. Tom could go home. The other child could play the computer game alone. Or we could split the time, 30 minutes on the computer game, both the children, and 30 minutes riding the bike, both the children. And then go through the consequences of those actions. Well, if we force Tom to play the computer game, he's not going to like it. If we force the other child to ride the bike, he's not going to like it. If they both go home, they both go their separate ways, they're going to be on their own. We're going to look at all those consequences. And then the final one there, splitting the time, we've got, if they do split their time, they both get to do something of what they wanted to do, and they both get to be together. So that seems like the best option. So you have a look at those choices, choose that best option, and then strategies. In the future, how are we going to put this in place? So what have we learned? So we've learned when a friend comes over, the child needs to spend a bit of time doing what the friend wants to do and a bit of time doing what he wants to do. So it's fair and equal. And you might simulate that with some role play, preparing, or mum and dad might help out and say, okay, let's have a practice at that. Where sometimes do something that we want to do, you sometimes do something that you want us to do, and we'll have a practice at it. A bit of a mouthful, that one, I know, but the recording's on here so you can have a look through and see exactly how it's broken down. And like I say, once you get in the grips of it, you won't need to be writing down every single option. The child hopefully will start to pick out the most appropriate option. Okay, right, so that's the end of my talk on social perspective taking today. So I've just got some contact details up for you there. So Maria Herbert is the other specialist teacher for communication and interaction. She also deals with early years as well. So you can always ask her some questions. Her email address is there. And of course, you're welcome to email me or phone me. My email address is there too. So yeah, it's just some things for you to get started there with on social perspective taking. But I would say a really key thing is to remember to try to understand the situation through the autism lens as well. Try to understand their perspective, and then you can unpick that and help them to understand our perspective in a positive way so that we can come to an effective solution. Take care.